Hello, and thanks for stopping by. Whatever your thoughts on the monarchy may be, there's no doubt that Queen Elizabeth II was a remarkable woman. In my view, she was a linchpin of modern history, a figure who, from the early 1950s up until her death at the age of 96 on the 8th of September 2022, was ever present. During her reign, she dealt with 15 British Prime Ministers, the first of whom was Winston Churchill, along with 13 American presidents and many other heads of state. Not to mention meeting countless 20th century icons, including the Beatles, Marilyn Monroe, and the crew of Apollo 11. And she was present at many historic events too. As such, I believe that, in the decades to follow, Elizabeth II will become synonymous with our recent past, in much the same way that her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, came to embody the 19th century. In this video, and as a tribute to the late monarch, I'd now like to show you several sites in London which have a connection with Elizabeth's long life. The most obvious place to begin our tour is of course Buckingham Palace, which, as well as being the monarch's official London residence, is also the royal family's HQ. Princess Elizabeth, as she was then, was baptised here in 1926 in the palace's private chapel, which was sadly lost in World War II, and she came to live here with her family in 1953, the year of her coronation. Prior to that, she and Philip had resided in nearby Clarence House. The Queen was no doubt somewhat surprised on the morning of the 9th of July 1982 when she awoke to find a complete stranger, Michael Fagan, who, despite the heavy security, had managed to sneak in for a cheeky peek, wandering around her bedroom. In the year prior to Fagan's break-in, another serious incident had occurred near the palace when the Queen, who was on horseback as part of the Trooping of the Colour ceremony, was fired at whilst riding along the Mall. Mercifully, the bullets, which were fired by a fellow named Marcus Sargent, were blanks, and thanks to her well-known equestrian skills, the Queen managed to keep her horse under control. Although she wasn't exactly what you'd call a cockney, she was born just outside the sound of Bow Bells after all. Elizabeth was still a bona fide Londoner, and that's because it was here, at number 17 Bruton Street, West 1, which is just moments away from Mayfair's Berkeley Square, that she entered the world at 2:40 AM on the 21st of April 1926. The Bruton Street home in which Elizabeth was born was owned by her Scottish grandparents, the Earl and Countess of Strathmore, and sadly it no longer exists, having been demolished in the late 1930s. The site is, however, marked by these two plaques. The Bruton name, in case you were wondering, refers to the town of Bruton in Somerset, which was associated with the Berkeleys, a family who rose to prominence during the Tudor era. It must be remembered that, due to the lineage which was in place when she was born, Elizabeth was never expected to be a future queen. This changed, however, when her uncle, the highly controversial figure, and that's putting it mildly, King Edward VIII, abdicated in 1936 in order to pursue a life with the American socialite Wallis Simpson, meaning the crown passed on to Elizabeth's father, George VI. George suffered from a stammer, which made public speaking, a vital skill for a monarch of course, very tough indeed. He therefore employed the services of the Australian speech therapist Lionel Logue, whose practice was located here, at 146 Harley Street, which, as you can see, is now marked by a green plaque. The relationship between George VI and Lionel Logue was dramatised in the 2010 film The King's Speech. Meanwhile, back at the Mall, in front of the steps to Carlton Gardens, you can see a memorial to George VI, along with the Queen's mother, who was also named Elizabeth. On the 26th of January 1926, a group of scientists crowded into a small attic workshop above 22 Frith Street in Soho to witness the Scottish inventor John Logie Baird demonstrate television for the very first time. This historic moment took place just 12 weeks before Elizabeth was born, and as she came of age, so too did television, and it was via this medium upon which much of the world would come to know her. One of the earliest examples of Elizabeth appearing on television took place on the 22nd of June 1939, when, aged 13, she and her younger sister Margaret were taken to Waterloo Station to greet their parents who were returning from a tour of the USA and Canada. The arrival of the Royal Train, which had travelled up from Southampton Docks, was broadcast live on the BBC. Although being the late 1930s, when television sets cost about the same as a family motor car, the number of people who were able to tune in to witness this would have been tiny compared to modern audiences. Despite this, a lot of effort went into televising the event, which involved wrapping some 2,200 yards of cabling around the station. Many decades later, in 1994, the Queen came again to Waterloo to participate in the opening of the Eurostar terminal, which, in the wake of moving to St Pancras, has since been converted to serve local trains. Elizabeth's father, George VI, died on the 6th of February 1952, aged just 56. When he passed away, Elizabeth and Philip were in Kenya, and upon receiving the news, they headed back to London immediately. They touched down at the London Airport, now Heathrow, on the 7th of February, meaning it was here that Elizabeth first set foot on British soil as the nation's new queen. Today, Heathrow's Terminal 2, which opened in its current guise in 2014, is also known as the Queen's Terminal in Elizabeth's honour. Since 1066, every British monarch, with the exception of Edward V, who, aged just 12, was presumably murdered before the ceremony could take place, and Edward VIII, who, as we saw earlier, abdicated, has been officially crowned within Westminster Abbey, a stunning place of worship which is soaked in history. Queen Elizabeth II's coronation took place on the 2nd of June 1953, and represented the first time that this elaborate ceremony was televised. Officials had in fact advised the Queen against allowing TV cameras in, but being young and in tune with the public mood, Elizabeth insisted. As she said, "I have to be seen to be believed." It's estimated some 10.4 million people watched the 1953 coronation, many of those viewers doing so on TVs which had been specially purchased for the event. And many of those who were lucky enough to own a TV also opened up their living rooms to friends and neighbours in order to share the experience. Whilst a further 1.5 million people were able to view the coronation on televisions which had been provided in public spaces, such as pubs and cinemas. To honour the new Queen, chefs at London's Cordon Bleu cookery school, which at the time was based in Marylebone, invented a new dish, the creamy curry-based coronation chicken, which was served up to 350 people in a special Coronation Day lunch held in the Great Hall of Westminster School, right next door to the Abbey. Whilst we're in the area, here's a question for you. What would you call this big old clock which stands just across from Westminster Abbey? Many people would say Big Ben, but as any pedant will tell you, this name only refers to the clock's mighty bell. The clock tower's official name is in fact the Elizabeth Tower, a title which was granted in 2012 in honour of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. During the course of her reign, Queen Elizabeth was on hand to unveil all manner of new buildings and engineering projects, many of which reflected the modernism associated with the new Elizabethan age. And when such an opening occurred, a commemorative plaque was installed. This large slab, for example, can be seen at Euston Station, which was completely rebuilt in the 1960s, and still looks very much like a building from that era. Whilst this one can be found within the sprawling brutalist Barbican Arts Complex, which, following many years of development, was officially opened by Her Majesty in 1982. Princess Elizabeth took her first journey on the London Underground on the 15th of May 1939, when, along with her sister Margaret and two minders, she travelled from St James's Park to Tottenham Court Road, via Charing Cross, as part of a trip to visit a branch of the Women's YMCA. Despite being royals, the group travelled in a third-class smoking car, which you don't get nowadays of course, and like most youngsters' first experience in the Underground, it is reported they were thrilled to witness the rumbling escalators, automatic ticket machines, and the train's pneumatic doors. "30 years later, on the 7th of March 1969, Queen Elizabeth presided over the official opening of the Victoria Line, which involved her taking a ride from Green Park to Oxford Circus in the driver's cab. The car used for this ceremony, one of the 1967 tube stock units, remained in service for many years, and is now preserved within the London Transport Museum's Acton depot. In 1977, the Queen once again got to ride in a tube cab when she opened the new branch of the Piccadilly line serving Heathrow Airport. Queen Elizabeth II is now of course honoured by the latest addition to London's transport network, that being the ultra-modern purple-branded Elizabeth line, which after considerable delay opened in May 2022, just in time for a Platinum Jubilee. One of the stations served by the Elizabeth line is Paddington, where you'll find this lovely little statue of Paddington Bear, a much beloved character with who the Queen interacted in what quickly became a very famous sketch, made, very poignantly, just a few months before she died.
Happy Jubilee, ma'am. And thank you for everything.
That's very kind.
In the northeastern corner of Trafalgar Square, you'll find the so-called Fourth Plinth, which, unlike its other three counterparts, which all bear statues, has remained empty for many decades. This changed in the late 1990s when a programme was devised to use the plinth as a pedestal for a series of temporary artworks, although it has yet to receive a permanent statue. Now this is only a rumour, but I've heard it said several times over the years that the Fourth Plinth has long been earmarked for a statue of Queen Elizabeth II, supposedly to be arranged in the aftermath of her passing. Given the exceptional role she played in our nation's history, I think such a memorial, right here in the heart of London, would be very well deserved indeed.